Shelly, my people, and this is a new video. This is a re-recording of my first video. I decided to condense everything down, so we're just gonna get right into it. Let's go. I'm gonna move this out the way. So, Israelites of Asia, China, the Yushi and Tokari tribes, the Tsubeshi culture, and the Jushi/Gushi people. Okay, let's go. Oh, let me click on it. Okay. Disclaimer, you can pause and read this. On to the next. You can pause and read it. Okay. Evidence of ancient Israelites in Asia. This video presentation is to showcase and share information and findings of our ancient Israelite history over in our homeland of Asia, the true land of Saim Shem. Particularly in this case, we'll be taking a closer look into historical sources that can be connected together to provide a net of truth. These sources are both from historical books published a while ago and also very recent ones. Inspiration for this topic, Lex Will, he's been making several videos documenting this topic and uncovering many of the hidden histories. I'll link his channel in the description below. Check out his videos on YouTube and donate to him as he really does put in hours of effort into research. I had learned of this topic from him. I haven't seen nobody else touch on this topic aside from him. Given credit where it's due. Alright, my sources for the video. You can pause and read. On to the next. Further sources for the video. You can pause and read. The split in Assyrian captivity. In both books, the British Israelites and the Lost Tribes and the Saxons of the East and of the West is stated that the Israelites were placed in Assyrian captivity, at some point separated. This separation, though, appears to have either happened after they had seized/captured the land of Bactria, or when they were displaced by northern barbarian tribes taking their lands. Bactria seized by the Sakai. You can pause and read this. I'm going to read the page. Now, Darius's expedition against the Scythians was about 500 BC, and 1,000 years before that brings us to the time of Moses. According to our Scythian ancestors, Colonel Galler, page 5, Strabo, book 1, verse 227, informs us that the ancient Greeks claimed all the northern nations which they were familiar under one name of Scythians, or according to Homer, nomads. Strabo again, and the sheep-feeding Sakai, a people of Scythian race, but they inhabited wheat-producing Asia. Truly, they were a colony of nomads, a righteous race. Strabo again. The Sakai or Sakai were an important branch of the Scythian nation. The above tribes, known as the Sakai by the Aryans and the Qumri by the Semitic tribes, are no other than the remnants of 10-tribed Israel who settled in Britain. According to Sharon Turner, in his History of the Anglo-Saxons, declares that they were a German or Teutonic, that is a Gothic or Scythian race. See page 34, volume 1, book 1, volume 1, History, and of the various Scythian nations which have been recorded, the Sakai or Sakai are the people from whom the descendant of the Saxons may be inferred with, at least with the least violation of probability. Very quick side note. I'm gonna revisit one of my later videos, but Anglos and the Saxons are two distinctly different peoples. Anglos and Saxons are now the same race. Saxons are distinct from Anglos, and that they are not Teutonic nor are they Germanic, because again, Israel comes from Shem. Just want to make that point that out. We're gonna get back on it. Okay. They seized Bactria in the most fertile part of Armenia, which from them derived of the name Saxena, that some of the divisions of this people were really called Sakasuna, or the sons of Sakai. It is obvious from Pliny, for he says that the Sakai who settled in Armenia were named Sakasani, according to Pliny. Okay. The author of the Ten Lost Tribes and the Saxons of the East says there is indication that the Sakai, if they took not their names from the house of Isaac, were at least connected with Isaac's descendants. Dr. Moore, again in Ancient Pillar Scions of Scotland, speaking of the Sakai. So you can pause and read this again if you want. Also, you could read the points on the right. On to the next. Bacteria, Bactriana. So you can just pause and read this if you want. Okay. Again, you can pause and read if you want the different names of Israelites in exile. In this book, the British Israelites, it goes on to list the different kinds of names for the Israelites in exile. It also states how of the many that were led away in captivity, some were able to escape from this fate and had fled westward, but it is also known that they did indeed flee eastward as well, with some also remaining in Central Asia. The ones that had went eastward would be found in the lands such as China and India, and the bulk of the captives being brought over to the Americas, though it could be more than likely that the case that they had inhabited those lands before said exile, as they had established some kingdoms that were conquered. So you can pause and read this if you want. The page should be visible. On to the next. And more names in exile. So this is, I'm pretty sure, from britishisrael.ca website. So you can pause and read this if you'd like to. About the differing names that the Babylonians and Assyrians had called them as, you know. The Yushi people. The Yushi Chinese and Pinyin, Rushi, Yushi, Rushi, Yuchi, Juchi, or Jushi were an ancient people first described in Chinese histories as nomadic pastoralists living in an arid grassland area in the western part of the modern Chinese province of Gansu during the first millennium BC. After a major defeat at the hands of the Xiongnu in 176 BC, the Yushi split into two groups migrating in different directions: the Greater Yushi, the Dai Yushi, and the Lesser Yushi, the Zhao Yushi. This started a complex domino effect that radiated in all directions and in the process set the course of the history for much of Asia for centuries to come. So a very quick summary from Wikipedia. Again, you can see how they noticed that they were split. Again, they were also pushed up in their native lands by the Xiongnu, who were an Indo-European group, more than likely. I'm still researching it, but again, barbarians. Yep, Eurasian Caucasoid. I could be wrong, but more than likely I'm not. If I am, I am. On to the next. Examples of migrations. So you have Bactria, which the Saxons had conquered. Again, Saxons are not Anglos. Anglos and Saxons are two distinct races. Again, also you have the Amu Darya, the Oxus River. Of course, you know. You have the cities of Alexander the Great, so Alexandria Eschate in the farther north of the Pamir Mountains. And you also have another city by Alexandria in the Caucasus, below the Hindu Kush regions in Gandhara, access way into India. And you can see the migration from the Yushi being pushed up by the Xiongnu, then moved out by the Wusun, then moved up by the Taiyuan in Sogdiana, them taking Bactria in 120 BC, then finally migrating into India in 30 CE, 375 CE. You also have Tibet somewhere around here, but again, migrations of the Yushi to Central Asia. On to the next. The Yushi and Tokhari history. See, this is tiny. Again, you can pause and you should be able to pause the video and be able to actively read this. But this is an excerpt from one of the books about the Yushi being related to the Tokhari, or the Tokhari being the Yushi. You see how the Greeks assigned the name Asianoid to the Yushi. Why would they do that? They knew exactly who the Yushi were, as did the Parthians, and so did all the other nations in the time. The Tokhari, usually always being found around the Yushi, so much so that they were inseparable. So again, you can pause and read this, but to summarize this, this is more or less discussing how the Tokhari and the Yushi were always found one another. So much so that more or less they were basically considered the same people groups. Wherever the Yushi went, the Tokhari would follow behind them. So yes, and so much so that they were more or less considered one and the same. And the fact that they would also go on to establish the Kushan Empire and the Kushan State, the Yushi people. So yes, you can pause and read this real quick if you want, but on to the next. The Tokhari equals the Yushi. As you can see here, Tokhari is often always associated with the Yushi according to Chinese historical accounts, which we should go by, to be honest. Even older Greek, even older, well, not older, even Greek historical accounts, along with the Chinese accounts, often refer to the Tokharians being related to the Yushi people, who founded the Kushan Empire. Now they want to say that they had spoke Bactrian or a form of Greek, but in reality, Tokharian is its own language, as well as it is a Semitic language, as we'll see later on. But according to the book right here, the people who emerge as Tokharians in Western sources are often equated with a branch of the Yushi of Chinese sources, who were driven first from the Gansu borderlands by the Shungnu, and then further west by the Wusun, arriving at the Oxus, which is the Amu Darya River, and going on to conquer Bactria and establish the Kushan Empire. So we just saw in the last slide who they were and their migrations and all that. And again, Narain argues that once one accepts the equation Tokharian equals the Yushi, then one is forced to follow both the Chinese historical sources, which for him would propel the Yushi back to at least the 7th century BC, and the geographical reference of their first site historical location, Nagansu, to the conclusion that they had lived there from times immemorial, meaning they are native to the Gansu corridor, which is in China. Simple. And also, again, Gansu China version of the Gansu, Bang Boop Bop, originally dispersed themselves from the area westwards. Now, one thing that we must take into account and understand is that they are not Indo Europeans. They're not. And we'll learn more why. But there's a big distinction between calling them Indo Europeans because, again, the Shungnu Indo Europeans. Of course, tribes fight, but at the same time, they're more or less, there's a common heritage as well as also common ancestry between the two. If they were Indo European, they wouldn't be pushed out by the Shungnu. They would be more or less assimilated by them, but that's not what happened. That's not what the case is to be. Meaning they are two distinctly different peoples. We're going to keep going. The Yushi on maps. The Saka or the Sakas use the name in is the name used in Middle Persian and Sanskrit sources for the Scythians, a large group of Eurasian nomads in the Eurasian steppe speaking Eurasian or my bad, Eastern Iranian languages. Modern scholars usually use the term Saka to refer to Iranians of the Eastern steppe and of the Turan basin. Here's the thing right here. This is modern scholars apply this term to the Iranians. But thing is, if we go by Chinese historical sources, they don't call them Iranians. And what we will learn later on in this video is that the Chinese distinctively know that they are not Bactrians and not Greeks. Actually, I'm gonna backtrack real quick. We'll go back. We'll go back one more. We'll read right here really quick. Again, you can pause and read, but we can see that the Parthian king Phraates II fought with certain Scythians who appeared in the sight of the Parthians who came from afar. He was killed fighting them. And his successor, Artabanos, continued fighting and attacked the Tokhari. Right? These events took place around 128 to 123 BC, at the time when the Yushi established their dominance over the Bactria Daxia. Over Bactria Daxia, the changes witnessed by Zhang Qian in 128 BC. Now, this guy Zhang Qian, he notes that he didn't come across any Bactrians living at the time. He doesn't record seeing or meeting any Bactrians. You know, Bob refer to nomads living on Asia and Ayatoi sees Bactria. See, this is where the Greek historians begin to mess up because they were aware of them, but they more or less only knew them by the accounts of the Chinese at the time. And also, well, maybe not just by the accounts of the Chinese at the time, but at the same time, perhaps actual mingling or interactions, perhaps, more than likely. But again, this guy, Zenkian, he notes that he didn't come across, I'm going to show later on, he didn't come across any actual Bactrian Greeks at the time. He didn't. When he only saw the Tokhari in the Yushi. Now, I'm pretty certain that they would be able to denote and mark. They knew the differences between the Yushi, the Shungnu, and the Greek. They knew the differences between them, meaning they had to have spoken different languages and had different cultures as well as different appearances altogether. Simple. Okay, we'll continue because I don't want this being too long. Here we go. You can clearly see that they also existed at the same time during the age of Rome, which is Edom, the Empire, and Parthia, their name being clearly distinct from all the other barbaric peoples. You see in the maps, we're going to zoom in. Look at that, they are right there. It's not spelled exactly it, but it's just two letter swap, but it's more or less talking about the same peoples. You have Sogdiana and Bactria, you have the Indo-Scythians, and you have the Turkic tribes, and you have Scythia, you have Samartia, Dacia, or Dacia, Magna Germania, the Balto Slavs, the Roman Empire in Arabia, and of course the Parthian Empire over here, right, as the buffer, including the Indo-Scythian region. Now, if the Yushi were actually Scythians, wouldn't they have a distinct name related to the Scythians, or being called a tribe of Scythia? Why are they distinctly named between the different? Like, why do they have such a distinct name? Turkic tribes, Indo-Scythians, the Uralic tribes, Samardia, Scythia, right? Like, why? They're not even. If you pay attention to the map, they're not within the actual borders of influence. If you really look at it, like paying attention to it, they're nowhere in the borders of it. You don't see like. Why is that the case? You can't You can't keep lumping them in. The Greeks, they tended to lump everybody who lived above them as barbarians without actually knowing or being involved within the cultures. And again, they called them the Asianoi. Come on, man. Shem is Afro-Asiatic. Come on. We'll continue. Three distinct classes. At the very bottom, it is said that the Tokhari Yushi had three distinct orders in their tribes, one sedentary farming component, one dominant nomadic, and lastly, a priestly order that is regarded as its own tribe. Who else has their people structured in such a fashion? Could it be Israelites, Judeans, and Levites? Now, according to scripture, Israel became more or less two sister nations. You had Israel and you had Judea, right? Now we knew for a fact that Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and Simeon more or less inhabited within the same nation state, whereas the other tribes of Israel lived separately from them, but they were more or less connected. Now, who else other people has this kind of setup? If you really like, just kind of break down, think about it. Again, the Israelites being Benjamites and Simeonites, along with the Judeans and Levites, forming this kind of order. As we could read right here, again, you can pause and read the whole article if you want. You can. But again, you can also just pay attention to the highlights as well. Yushi, this is therefore in all cases we consider the Tokari appear to be a sedentary adjunct to the nomadic Asioi, Yushi. This is quite accurately illustrated in the words of Trogus, Regis Tokarum Asiani, the Asiani kings of Tokari. Perhaps you could also add to the remark by the commentary to a poem by this guy, yeah. But you can see right here, the third component in such a type of society is represented by a priestly corporation, which is also regarded as a tribe. It is the nomadic component, such as royal Scythians or royal Sakas, that always migrates, but the sedentary component remains settled on the spot. If you read the book, my bad. If you've read the Tanakh, the first five books of the Torah or the Tanakh, the whole book, you would have a good understanding. But more or less, having that understanding and pairing it with this pairs very well and showcases that again these would be Israelites. You have the nomadic royal house, which is Judah. You have the sedentary components, which are the Israelites, such as the Simeonites and the Benjamites, who built cities. And then you have the priestly order, which are the Levites. And again, Sakas coming and being derived from the name Isaac or Yitzhak. A Yitzhak, simple. The more Yushi equal Tokari proof. Again, you can pause and read these if you'd like to, but this is just more or less further. This is just more or less my bad, slightly distracted. This is just more or less information compounding the fact that the Yushi are the Tokari. They are one and the same. And again, we were talking about this historical traveler, Chinese traveler Zheng Qian in 128 BC, right? And we could quickly look through here, right? We could also see that it may be before Bactria was conquered by the Aesir or the Yushi, the Tokari were already settled in Bactria as a sedentary agriculturalist people around 135 BC. These Tokari went there in a different, separate way from the Agioi. The Yushi took possession of the country with the agreement of the Bactrian Greeks after the latter had gone over the Hindu Kush into northern India that they conquered. Of course, this entire intricate story is a pure fiction of contemporary scholars. There is not even a hint of it in the sources, and this kind of story of itself is totally unrealistic. Now, this is a modern scholar's twisted perspective and more or less gaslighting this guy who existed at the time frame. I mean, there's records of him existing that that he more or less fabricated this entire story for whatever reason. I guess it's kind of contrived, I mean, this guy who lived in the actual time period, and they're just kind of saying he's lying. He would benefit. He has nothing to benefit from making up the story. So it's safe to say that it's pretty legit. Like, I mean, you could research it yourself, but we know modern historians aren't always the most accurate or the most unbiased. Let's be realistic. But again, this guy Zheng Qian mentions that he didn't come across any Bactrian Greeks living at the time. He only came across the Tokari, you know. And again, the same Chinese sources talk about a Yushi migration from the Gansu, inform us that not all the Yushi went to the west. Some of them caught the lesser Yushi stayed in the Gansu mixed with local Tibetans. So again, it's better for us to go by the Chinese historical sources because they had much more history and much more actual visitation and cultural exchanges with these people as opposed to the Greeks who really didn't actually know them. Again, the Greeks classified anybody living above them as barbarians and kind of denote them to being this one huge conglomerate of tribes as opposed to the Chinese who could distinctively set apart and see that these are different actual nations of people. They live amongst each other, but they're different, you know? So we should stick to the Chinese sources. We should, you know? And again, you even had a Buddhist monk who lived in the 4th century who translates the word Tokara as lesser Yushi. And in their own ancient history, the Yushi and the Tokari are inseparable. Even before the Yushi left Central Asia under the pressure from the Xiongnu in 160 BC. Again, Chinese sources. Like they lived between the city of Dunhuang, which did not exist at the time, and the Kilian Mountains. Come on, come on, man. They even also called them. You also have the ancestors of Yushi called the Nusi, who mine jade, which I think is on the ephod, if I'm correct. The holy garment of the Levites. It's one of the stones. I think. But again, the Yushi are the Tokari. Simple. And they spoke a Semitic language. They had spoke language derived from Aramaic, which is a Semitic language, Afro-Asiatic. It's not agreed upon, but we can all guess the reason why it's not. Again, modern historians, they like to twist and change the narrative. That's what they do. It being displayed under the Egyptian language branch would be illogical considering Egyptian is a Hamitic language which is both Proto-Semitic and Phoenician, bleh, in which both Proto-Semitic and Phoenician fall under. Now the thing is here is like we have this current twist on the fact that when you look at the three sons of Noach and the branches and the lineages that come from them, right? You had Japheth, Shem, and Ham, or however the order is. We know Ham's the youngest. Shem is Afro-Asiatic. Japheth is Indo-European, Indo-Iranian, or Indo-Aryan, and Hamitic is Ham. Again Hamitic languages. Again, it's safe to say that again, Aramaic is not an Egyptian language. It's not. It doesn't come from Egyptian because again, that's we have to look at the forefathers. Again, Egypt is the Greek name. It's the Anglo adapted Greek name for what we would call Hebrews, what us Hebrew Israelites would call Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is the son of Ham, whereas Aram was the son of Shem. Two different fathers, therefore two different parental systems. That's how it should be. That's how it is. So again, they spoke a Semitic language, and we know that Semitic is Afro-Asiatic, spoken by Afro-Asian people. You can't have an Afro-Asian language that's not spoken by Afro-Asian people unless they lost that language and somebody else came and took their language. Simple. It's very disingenuous. Also, if you look at say quote unquote Paleo Hebrew or just Hebrew script or Asian languages, it's very you can see the resemblance. You can see it in the script. And the Tokhari language, known as a dead language, can be dated back as far back as the 4th century AD, existing in the same time frame of late antiquity, such as Primitive Irish, Gothic or Classic Armenian. It consisting of three possible languages, differing purposes as seen on the right, so you can pause and look at this. Okay. In the UCP, this is tiny. I don't know if y'all be able to read this. Okay, nah. I made the same mistake I made in my last video. This is just a read screenshot. So again, you can pause read if you want, but it's a screenshot from like a slide before. Well, yeah, the Yushi people would go on to establish the Kushan kingdom, state, or empire, in the lands of Bactria. Now, we should always keep in mind that Israelites weren't always seemingly righteous or sin-free, as idolatry was apparent from the influence of other nations. If you read the Torah and the Tanakh, you clearly see that the Israelites would they kept fucking up. They just kept having issues and problems and falling into sin again and again. So it's like, yeah, it's a recurring theme throughout the book. And as you can see, her worship by the Kushan Empire, as referenced by the prophets, she was worshipped by the Yushi people and those who lived among them. Take note of non-Iranian. Safe to say that her name is just a literal shortening of her former name, nothing erroneous about it. It explains why Kushan was also destroyed later on. Now, when I say take note of non-Iranian, we keep on hearing that these people keep calling that, that the Yushi are Indo-European or they were Indo-Iranian speaking peoples or speaking. They kept more or less grouping the Yushi with Indo-Iranians or Indo-Europeans, but we clearly see here that they are non-Iranian. Now, we should keep in mind and note the fact that both Iranians and Europeans and Aryans all carry the subpart Indo, right? So when you put all of them together, again, they not even put all of them together, they all come from the same. They literally all come from the same branching ancestral line, And also get into that later in another video, but the Yamnaya, that's gonna be a short one, but yeah, they're all Indo peoples, Indo-Iranian, Indo-European, and Indo-Iranian or Indo-Aryan. It states here that they are non-Iranian. So and again, they're not even lumped with the Bactrians or the Sogdians or the Khwarezmians, So it's like they're none of the above. They're not grouped with them, and they are set apart from them entirely. So you can you can see the framework I'm building here in regards to who they actually are. Again, they're not Bactrians, they're not Sogdians, they're not Khwarezmians, and they're non-Iranians, but they were worshiping an Eastern Iranian goddess. As we do know, one of the things, or one of the biggest stipulations that Israel was prohibited from worshiping was the Queen of Heaven, and she had over one of her monikers is the Queen of 10,000 different names, right? So you can see where we're going at this. So yes, again, you could pause and read this, but yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the prophet Jeremiah was talking about, not prophet. I think this is I think this was or this is another name for the deity that Jeremiah the prophet was speaking against. That the Israelites were burning incense in worship of her. It's either Jeremiah or Isaiah. I have to reread it, but yes. Again, y'all can also do your own research, but yes, they're non-Iranian. They're not Greeks. They're non-Iranians. They're not Sogdians. They're not Khwarezmians. They are. They don't fit any of those groups, right? The Chinese knew who they were. So again, they're Israelites. We'll keep going. Okay, now we have the Jushi people. Now, to start with the Jewish people, it is stated that they were one of the Tocharian peoples and even had spoken their language. As we have seen prior, Tochari equals Yushi, and that the Yushi equals Saka Sakai or Sakai Sakai, and that the Saka Sakai peoples or Saka Sakai equals Israelites. It is that simple to follow. Remember that the Tokari language is Semitic, which is Afro-Asiatic, Afro peoples. It gets no simpler than that. It is that simple. Again, Jushi from 108 BC to 450 AD, meaning like, they existed around the same time that the Tokarians existed, and therefore the Yushi. And I'm gonna blow this map up later because I'm pretty sure I can show it on the next slide. But Jushi is right next to the Tokarians. Bleh. I'm speaking over myself, and this is in the year 400 AD. The Jushi kingdom and contemporary polities of continental Asia, circa 400 AD. Kingdom, the capital of Jiaohe, and it was a monarchy. History established as a vassal of the Tang dynasty, destroyed by the northern Liang, which is a branch of the Shungnu, which we will see later on. So, centuries old conflict from centuries old peoples just duking it out. And it states that the Jushi may have been one of the Tocharian peoples and spoken one of the associated languages. They're right next to them, my guy, and they were destroyed by the northern Liang. Like it's you, they are the Tocharians. We're going to see furthermore. All right, now let's take a look at this. The year 400. You have the Jushi and the Tocharians. You have the northern Liang, which is nearby in the same spot as the Shungnu. You have the Byzantine Empire, the Sasanian Empire. You have Axum, Meroe. You have the Huns, Sargath, the Semioids, the Paleo-Siberians, the Tungus, the Goguryeo, which I'm going to research, the Northern Wei, the Eastern Jin, the Funan, and the Champa. You have the Vakataz, the Western satraps in the Gupta Empire, the Khotan, the Huyan, and the Rowan Khaganate. You know, so the Kyrgyzs, the Gauju Turks, and the Kokel. But yes, Jushi right next to the Tocharians. They are right next to each other, and they allude to the fact that they spoke in the same language and they derived from said same peoples. They are the Yushi. Also, like you just look at the name, Jushi, Yushi. Come on, it's simple. And more information on the Jushi. They were a very agricultural people who had plenty of livestock with no swine along of that it seems, who also lived in tents. They were proficient with bows and arrows. They had been under the dominion of the Shungnu, who were the ones who drove out the majority of the Yushi beforehand. Now, earlier in the video, it stated that there were two migrations of the Yushi. You had the Dai Yushi, known as the Greater Yushi, and you had the Lesser Yushi, known as the Xiao Yushi. And those who stayed behind, the Jushi people, are the Xiao Yushi people. They're one and the same, hence why they have the same name. Again, you go back far enough in history, there was no letter J. They would literally just be called the Yushi people. It's just spelled differently, but it's the same name. Come on. And you could pause and read right here if you want. Yeah, you don't see no pigs. You don't see none of that. You know, it's one of the commandments that we're not supposed to eat pork, and you don't see pork anywhere listed. I mean, they list even camels. You telling me camels, but no pigs? Come on. Fishing with bows and arrows, Israelites, we proficient like that's it tracks, yes. And again, the Jushi in the kingdom of Kroan were linked in the account of Zheng Qian, in part because they were both under the control of the Shungnu. Come on, man. Come on. You know? The Shungnu are the northern Liang. They are one and the same. And also that their territory split. You had nearer Jushi, which was near or controlled by the Han, you know, and whereas the further Jushi was controlled by the Shungnu. Come on, man. Two cities, Jiaohe, Jimasa, and sadly, the Jushi never gained their independence because they were more or less removed from history. Unfortunately. The Jushi's end and disappearance. As the Han dynasty defeated the Shungnu previously, they had assumed control of the Jushi and their lands as seen in the previous slide. The northern Liang, who were related to the Shungnu, had later destroyed the Jushi state and seized the capital city of Jiaohe in 450 AD. Afterwards, the Jushi people were just forgotten, or are forgotten, or just didn't. No, they kind of just disappeared from historical record, somewhat. But on the surface, yeah, they more or less are just stopped recording history, right? Oh, pardon me. In the Jushi, that's the Chinese name, and Pinyin, Jushi, sometimes pronounced Cheshi or Gushi. Chinese Gushi were people probably related or probably associated with the Subeshi culture who established a kingdom during the first millennium BC in the Turpan Basin, modern Jiangjiang, Xinjiang, China. The kingdom included the area of Ading Lake and eastern Tianshan Range during the late second, early first century BC. My apologies. The area was increasingly dominated by the Han Dynasty and the northern neighbors of the Jushi, the Shungnu, and became one of the many minor states of the western regions of the Han Dynasty China. In 450 AD, the northern Liang destroyed the state of Jushi and occupied its capital city of Jiaohe, Yakoto. Jiaohe, later known as Yakoto in Yorgul, was destroyed in a Mongol attack in the 13th century. So the city no longer stands; it's basically gone, or there's just ruins now. So it was destroyed. But again, and also we'll learn that the Subeshi culture are the Yushi and are the Jushi. You know, so get into it. The Jushi and Kanibasam, a grave site being attributed to a man a part of the Jushi culture or an older culture, the Yushi or Tokari, cultivated for psychoactive purposes like aid in divination. If Kanibasam is present in the scripture and with the people of the book, and you've seen evidence that these are the same people, it all makes sense. Now, Kanibasam is just weed. It's just marijuana. It's weed. That's all it is. Weed is actually in the Torah and also in the Tanakh. Weed, weed is scriptural. You know, it's there. It exists for a reason. Now I'll read this real quick. Uh, Actually, no, y'all can pause and read this yourselves. But it basically talks about a Jushi shaman or precursor culture, the Subeshi or the Tokarans of the Yushi people. A shaman had a big old bowl of weed, dried cannabis, 789 grams. And due to its extremely dry condition and alkaline soil acted as preservatives. Looked green. So again, it was just weed. Kind of bought some like this is a nigga. This is an old nigga, shaman, priest, spiritual man, nigga. Had a bunch of weed. That sounds like a Israelite to me, because we love our smoke. You can you don't even really need critical reason. It's just deductive reason. You're just like, all right, this is obviously a nigga. Yeah, yeah. All right. In the Subeshi culture, the Subeshi culture is somewhat seen as a mysterious culture when it's in reality just an offshoot of the Yushi people. It quite literally inhabits the same land area of the Jushi people who are right next to, again, the Yushi people. Check earlier in the video. If anything, this is purposely kept an open secret to hide the fact that they're all in the same. So yeah, like literally. We saw a few slides ago that the Yushi people were dated back to being in the Gansu quarter to the 7th and 8th century BC. This is just anywhere from the 11th century to 1st century BC. The Subeshi culture is an Iron Age culture from the area of Shenshen County, Turfan, and Zhenjiang at the eastern edge of the Tarim Basin. They're all in the same area, therefore, it's all the same people, just different names. Like, come on. It might be associated with the Cheshi state, the Chushi, the Jushi kingdom, known from historical sources. And the Jushi people come from the Tokharians, and the Tokharians come from the Yushi. And the Yushi come from the Sakas, or the Sakasai, and the Sakai, and those are the Israelites. And you just found a nigga with a bunch of weed. Look at that. So why are they not the same people? Come on. I'm gonna blow up the map. Alright, this is 325 BC. So, bam! Yushi, the Sebeshi culture, the Jushi were right there, and so were the Tokharians. My guy, don't get any simpler. And again, the Macedonian Empire, Alexander the Great. If you're at the Book of Maccabees, you got two cities over here which border the lands. Like, look at that. And you see the Sakha realm, and not even involved in Sakha. Like, look at that. Look. Here, the Scadians right there. Like, my boy, look at that. It does not get any better than this. It doesn't get any simpler than this. Also, before Axum split off Moreau, or they even existed after Moreau, they're old. You have the Jin, which I'm gonna research, but simply, boom, it's simple. They're the same people. Sebeshi culture continued. You can pause and read this yourselves. It just goes into detail about the Sebeshi. Again, it's stated that the Sebeshi culture is the possible predecessors to the Tokharians. That's a tongue twister. They also said that the Jushi people come from the Sebeshi culture. The Jushi also speak Tokharian, and we know that the Tokhari are literally always with the Yushi. And that you could translate the name Tokhari or Tokharian to Yushi. So it's like, look at this. The Jushi people are the Tokharians. The Tokharians are the Sebeshi culture. The Sebeshi culture are the Yushi peoples. And the Yushi people are the Sakai, and the Sakai are known to be the Israelites. It's a long equation, but it's a simple equation. Just follow it. It's simple. All in the same areas. Contact with China. So they know. They know. Asia also mentioned in the Apocrypha, in the book of Esdras, also the book of Ezra in Hebrew. Asia is mentioned as one of the nations alongside with Egypt, Babylon, and Syria. What can be inferred is that they are more or less literal neighbors that border each other. Second Ezra 16:1 will be unto thee Babylon and Asia, will be unto thee Egypt and Syria. Gird up yourselves with cloths of sack and hair. Bewail your children, and be sorry, for your destruction is at hand. A sword is sent upon you, and who may turn it back? A fire is set among you, and who may quench it? Why is Asia literally mentioned in the Apocrypha, but Asia is so far removed and away from Egypt, Babylon, and Syria? Like, you look at the map, it's a big fucking space, right? Well, not maybe space, but it's like they're not really near each other. But this brings a new level of understanding in that the way we see maps, or the modern chronological maps that we're given and we're seeing in the public eye, they're not exactly correct. We can ascertain that much. They're not exactly correct. But continuing. Also, images. Cyrus the Great, the Achaemenid Empire, 522 to 486 BC, under Darius the Great. So this dealt with the whole Assyrian captivity, Cyrus. Also, look at that image right there. I just see nothing but just blacks. Ancient China's royal envoy. Ah, he's a royal envoy. Look at that. Starts his journeys to the west during the Western Han Dynasty, as shown in a fresco in the Magao Caves in Gansu Province, northwest China. So they knew how to paint and how to actively do their colors. And I'm not gonna go ahead and say, oh yeah, the harm. Nah, they weren't black. I mean, they might have been a little darker, but eh. But again, the Yushi though are depicted. Come on. Zhang's mission was to build an alliance with the Yushi, an ethnic group based around where are now. Okay, this wasn't me typing. This is the clip. Yeah, based around where are known now as northwestern Gansu province and Zhejiang Hui Autonomous Region. Oh, the fucking tongue twister. But even art, man, like, come on. All right, conclusion. With supported historical evidence that has been shown, a conclusion can be made that Israelites do come from Asia, specifically East Asia. In effect, and if it does go to also support the fact that we are also Semitic, meaning Afro-Asiatic. With this video showcasing Afro peoples having extensive histories in Asia. And, well, I already made these, but I'm going to just remake them shorter. Well, I didn't make these two yet. Well, they're going to be long form because I like to talk, but I'll condense them down like I did this one. But yes, I think this is it. Uh, yeah, I'm just gonna record them and re-record and make them shorter. Just cut out a lot of the flack. Again, y'all just gonna have to do a lot of reading. But yeah, Shalom. Y'all have yourselves a good day or a good night wherever you are, and praise to the Most High, Hayah Hayah. Praise to the Most High, Hayah Hayah, Hayah Hayah. Shalom. Oh yeah.